On October 21st, IBJ unveils the 2025 Women of Influence. Join us to celebrate Indy's most inspiring leaders and hear the powerful stories behind their success. Don't miss this moment. Register now at ibj.com/influence2025.
Off the Record with the Indiana 250 is presented by Prolific. When what worked stops working, I point purpose-driven leaders to Prolific, the growth firm. They turn plans into results with full-service marketing and strategy focused on outcomes, not vanity metrics. Head to prolifichq.com to learn more.
Don't talk about it, earn it. The way I think about earning it is trust. To me, I don't mean that you shouldn't steal or you should be honest. We take that as those things as a given. But that you do what you say you'll do, and that the people around you know that they can count on you for whatever it is, and often without you being asked.
Welcome to Off the Record, a podcast featuring leaders on IBJ Media's Indiana 250 list. I'm Nate Feltman, CEO of IBJ Media, which publishes the Indiana 250, a list of the most influential business people in Indiana. Today I'm joined by Mark Miles, President and CEO of Penske Entertainment, which of course is comprised of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, IndyCar, and IMS Productions. Mark's leadership role with Indiana's most iconic sports venue and its most iconic sporting event, the Indy 500, is really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what Mark has meant to the decades-long Indy sports movement. He joined Holman and Company as president and CEO in 2013, fresh off leading the city's efforts to host the 2012 Super Bowl. He led the city's successful bid for the game in 2008 and then became chairman of the board of the city's Super Bowl host committee, leading its 18 staff members and thousands of volunteers and pulling off a Super Bowl celebration that really raised the bar for future cities. Mark's leadership of the city's Super Bowl effort were concurrent with his role as president and CEO of the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership, which he led as CEO from 2006 to 2012. Mark's leadership of CICP beginning in 2006 marked his return to his hometown of Indy after 15 years as head of the Association of Tennis Professionals, the ATP Tour. The ATP Tour, the world's premier tennis circuit, grew in stature and prize money under Mark's leadership. He got his start in tennis here in Indy, where he led the city's longtime clay court professional tournament through its transition to hard courts. That was in the mid to late 80s, which is when Mark led the city's hosting of the 1987 Pan American Games. As president of the organizing body, he oversaw 38,000 volunteers and staged the most successful Pan Am Games in history. I think success means you didn't lose money, which is really, really good. Big. In the 1980s, Mark also held executive positions at Eli Lilly and Company and the Indianapolis Water Company. And he worked on and managed numerous political campaigns after graduating from Wabash College, including the campaign for U.S. Senate of Indianapolis iconic Mayor Richard Lugar, Mayor Bill Hudnut's 1979 re-election campaign, and then Congressman Dan Quayle's successful U.S. Senate campaign. Mark, you've done so many different things. I can't wait to have the conversation, but welcome to the Indiana 250 podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Well, of course, I want to get to IndyCar, which we'll spend some time on, but I always like starting with my podcast guests at the beginning. So you were growing up in Indy, attending North Central High School. Did you have any idea back then that you wanted to spend a career first in politics and then in sports? Was that on your mind at all back in high school?
It never was, not in high school. And frankly, I remember being with my wife in the car moving home to Indy from Jacksonville, Florida area where we lived during the tennis years, and having 12 hours to talk and saying to ourselves, well, what are we going to do with our extra time? Knowing that I was going to work at the CICP, and we couldn't figure it out. The one conclusion we shared was anything but sports. So I never really thought of it as a career. I was a Boy Scout, and we had co-scoutmasters. They were both lawyers at prominent downtown firms, and there was a scout banquet, and I was seated with Harry Ice, and so I thought that was the coolest thing ever, law. And I always thought I'd go to law school, and then life got in the way. I never got to law school.
Right.
I wasn't thinking about politics.
So it wasn't on your mind at all. So as I mentioned, you worked for some Hoosier legends when it comes to political legends: Dick Lugar, Bill Hudnut, Dan Quayle. So how did you first start getting engaged in volunteering, campaigning, and talk a little bit about the political time you spent with those great Hoosiers?
In a bizarre way, when I was in grade school at School 70 on the north side of Indianapolis, I had a dear friend whose parents were prominent Democrats, and there was a U.S. Senate campaign. So Tom Streeter and I got on the bus after school each day and went down to the Democrat Senate headquarters and stuffed envelopes. And that was my entry into politics. So I guess I had the campaign bug in a sense from an early age. But then fast forward to a summer while I was at Wabash College, and my dad had gotten me one of the plum summer jobs at Eli Lilly, which in my case was cleaning out the liquid and ointment tubs where they made the medicine and sweeping the floors. And I didn't mind the work, but I was just bored to tears. So I went home and I was complaining about it. And my sister was dear friends with a woman now named Deborah Daniels. Mm-hmm. And Debbie heard me complaining, and she said, well, go see my brother. He'll give you something to do. So I had an appointment to meet this guy named Mitch Daniels. And I said, you don't have to pay me. I can give tennis lessons at night if there are nights. And so I got involved in the Lugar campaign against Spy in 74, and started in the youth campaign, and then did scheduling and advance work, and then traveled with the senator, now eventually the senator. And I guess that sort of set the hook for campaign work.
And was there ever a moment, I think you were a political science major at Wabash, right? So was there ever a moment where you said, gosh, I like this stuff a lot. I like being in and around politics. Maybe one day I'll think about running for office. Had that ever crossed your mind, or has it crossed your mind?
I honestly don't remember if it did before that campaign in 74, possibly. But that campaign, seeing what a candidate does up close every day, was the death knell for any political ambition I might have had personally. I knew in 74 I was never running.
I can understand that. That's why I feel when people ask a similar question to me, that what candidates go through, it's even worse today. Right?
I used to say, look, if I knew I was going to live twice, maybe one of them, but not this one.
Not this one. That's a good answer. But the skills that there are so many skills that I know that you must have learned, including organizational skills. When you run a campaign, you've got to be organized. You have to have volunteers who are out doing all sorts of different jobs. You raise lots of money, of course, during a campaign. You're marketing your candidate. All those skills, I'm guessing, must have played a role in your ability to be successful with things like the Pan Am Games and later the Super Bowl. Talk a little bit about, if that's true, how some of those things you learned during those years working with great people that I mentioned that were the leaders, the political leaders, may have translated into eventually some of these other efforts that you were involved in.
It's an astute observation, if at least I feel like it is. I mean, in campaigns back then, you're really young. You get the opportunity, if you come back for another one to do things you're not qualified to do. You're just sort of thrown in, and it's sink or swim. But I now look back on those years as sort of boot camp for leadership, because you sink or swim, and you've got to learn a lot of things. You've got to learn to be able to persuade people to be on the same and get them on the same page, which means communicating, simplifying complicated tasks. It means dealing with pressure. It means dealing with bad days. It meant working your tail off. So in every campaign, you start on one day, and on one date certain, the first Tuesday in November, you're going to know how you did. So to me, that was a huge motivator, and you wanted to win. So there was, you never went home thinking that the day was done. It's endless work, and yet we managed to have a fair amount of fun in the process. So all those various things you do with campaigns, fundraising. I didn't know the word mentor or thinking about contacts. But when you're in a campaign and you're raising money and you're asking people to do stuff, and the people you're asking to do stuff are often people who are kind of the movers and shakers in town, you end up with real relationships, not some kind of networking thing. And that was, in retrospect, really valuable.
Yeah. Well, you described it. I mean, you're going for one date to get your candidate elected, just like with the Super Bowl. It happens on one day. There's a weekend involved, but it's essentially one day. Pan Am Games, it's going to happen, and you better be ready. So I could see how that translates.
Yeah. For sure.
So you had the great fortune to work with some of these greats I mentioned, and I want to focus on Senator Dick Lugar for a minute. So many leaders that I know, like yourself, have really point to their engagement, their involvement, working alongside Dick Lugar as someone who was really a leader that they kind of pointed their compass towards in terms of integrity and how he did things and all the some of the leadership skills they learned. So would you say this? I mean, can you talk a little bit about why maybe he was such an influential person? To this day, there are so many leaders who are still leading, who just time and time again mention him as the model for leadership.
Yeah, I think two things about him in particular. I don't have any, different insights. He was brilliant. Mm-hmm. I used to travel with him, and I'd try to come up with something I could quiz him on in the car that he didn't know the answer to. It was impossible. English lit. It didn't matter what it was. His brain was scary smart. He was from that generation, coming out of World War II, that was totally principled, all about the country, did everything for the right reasons, and then he was a very hard worker. I don't remember ever hearing him say anything negative. So, you're in a campaign. I would have been saying negative things, but Dick Lugar was always unfailingly positive and really inspiring for the way he worked. But the other thing was, I'm not really sure exactly how it happened, but he attracted a bunch of really great people to work for him. So one of the great benefits was the exposure to him, but another one was, getting to be really close to Mitch and all kinds of other people I'm sure have been part of this podcast that have, we had a lot of fun while we were working our tails off, and those friendships have lasted a lifetime. Yeah.
Well, Mitch, it feels like Mitch Daniels, our former governor, I had the good fortune to work for him directly. Of course, I knew Senator Lugar and had such great admiration for him. But what you described also, I think, so fittingly describes Governor Daniels in terms of bringing people along and all the friendships and all the incredible people that were part of his orbit over his 8 years and beyond. It's just amazing. Those coattails, they keep going. It's pretty awesome. So I want to turn to the Pan Am Games because it's such an interesting. I remember the Pan Am Games well, and I did a little research. I guess they're still going on. For a minute I thought maybe they weren't going on, but they're still happening. So you end up leading, and it's amazing to me to think back in 1987 that the city of Indianapolis, of all places in the U.S., the city of Indianapolis is chosen, and you're part of that effort to be the place where we're going to have the Pan Am Games. This is fascinating. So a lot of younger listeners may not know or may not pay attention to the Pan Am Games, but they occur every 4 years, like the Olympics. I think they happened the year before the Olympics. But talk a little bit about how that came about and how you ended up in the middle of it.
Well, my involvement again was just serendipity. The city had decided, and I'll elaborate a bit, that we wanted to attract sports events to Indianapolis. And it was decided strategically that multi-sport events would be a particular lane that maybe we could excel in. And the Lilly Endowment with Jim Morris at the helm was incredibly important to this. So, and for lots of reasons, not the least of which was we had a lot of venues to build if we were going to have competition and practice facilities for all the sports. The Pan Am Games, we actually had more sports and more events leading to a medal than the Summer Olympics. So it's a big undertaking from a logistical and facilities infrastructure perspective. The city had done, had created the Indiana Sports Corporation when they realized that we really couldn't be great at this sports thing without any kind of center of gravity. So this organization was created by Ted Bowman, Sandy Knapp, and they were brilliant. And they quickly went after the National Sports Festival. And that's a multi-sport event. It's basically all the summer sports, but just U.S. athletes, and killed it. It was so well done. It blew away all the national governing bodies of each of the summer Olympic sports, and it blew away the U.S. Olympic Committee. So, I remember being dispatched at one point to Japan to observe the World University Games. We thought maybe that would be the next big thing after the National Sports Festival. And then everybody's minding their own business, and the OSOC calls and says they just got a call from that they just learned that the previously named host, which I think was Ecuador, for the Pan Am Games had defaulted. So there's only 4 years left. Normally you have 6 years to do it. We'd love for Indianapolis to be the bid city, but it'll be competitive. I had just sold a company and was waiting for it to close, and Ted and Jim said, would you help us put the bid together? I was working actually for Tom Moses. And so, it sort of threw ourselves into that, went down there to make the pitch. We won through a competitive process that was decided in a meeting in Mexico City. By the time we got home, Castro had announced that he was boycotting and that Cuba wouldn't be participating, which is a bad thing during the Cold War with those great athletes from Cuba, if you're thinking about the success of the Pan American Games. So, we got it. And I don't actually remember who walked into my office or called me and said, we'd like you to be the president of it, but that's what happened. And again, I had no idea what I was getting into, but it maybe the campaign stuff had a relevance. It was I could write a book about the Pan Am Games.
I'm sure. Well, you mentioned Fidel Castro in Cuba, and there's an interesting story about that. You've told me long ago, but I forget the details. What was the reason? Because you went and actually visited Cuba and met with Fidel Castro. Is that right?
3 times, a total of 9 or 10 hours. 2 of them were before the games, our games, and one was post-mortem. Yeah, the first one, we were it was Ted and myself and Sandy Knapp and the head of the U.S. Olympic Committee. And it was all you went down on a King Air from the Miami International Airport, and it was like Acme Air. It was, I'm sure the CIA arranged the flight or the State Department. It was crazy. And they never really told you were going to meet him, but we were treated extraordinarily well, saw their facilities and learned a fair amount about Havana. And then one night, a knock on the door in the Cuba Libre Hotel, and they say, get up, you're wanted for a high-level governmental meeting at midnight. So you get dressed, and they take you off in the Russian car and take you into the Plaza on the plaza to the palace, which is his office and maybe home, I don't know. And I had read everything I could get my hands on about Cuba and Castro, just because I thought it'd be useful. And so we get up this elevator, we sit in a holding room, and then they say, follow us. And I was the last one in the room. There were like 4 of us. It was 1 a.m. at this point, and you walk around the corner, and there's Fidel in the hat, the green, olive green uniform. And he says to me, you're very young to have this responsibility. And I said, actually, I'm 3 months older than you were when you won the revolution. And that was it. We were hot. We were buds right then. We go into this conference room off his office, and we're in there for over 3 hours. And I'm sure he was the speaker for 2 hours and 40 minutes of it. And
was it all about sport? Was it about?
No. It was the politics. Well, after it quit, it meandered a bit at the beginning.
Yeah.
At one point, he gets up and he leaves the room, and he comes back in with a little hardbound book, which is his report to the Politburo that year. So that's his State of the Union speech, but it's ours. So there's a book. and he turns to the chapter on the Pan Am Games, and he reads to us how he told the Cuban people that we had paid a bribe and stolen the right to host the games from Havana. Havana was the competition to get it.
Is that right? Wow.
So, obviously they couldn't participate because we got it unethically. So my recollection of it was I couldn't stand it anymore. I'm trying to be patient, but eventually, but you could probably convince the Cuban people that it'd be okay if you wanted to. And I thought I was going to be summarily shown out, but it's turned, and he started laying out, without ever saying these are the conditions, things that would have to happen. Direct Air Cubana flights without having to stop in Miami where they would normally be boarded. They'd have to be able to watch it on television, and they'd be happy to pay, but our government wouldn't let us pay. So you got to give it to us for free unless you can figure out a way for the U.S. Customs or whoever it was to allow you to take the money, and 2 or 3 other things. So I eventually say, so if we do this and this and this and this, you're in. And he sort of said yes. So we left there, and we kind of knew what we needed to do. And Lugar was very important in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Dan Quayle was in Armed Services. Mitch was in the White House working for Reagan. We were very well positioned, and all those things but one happened. The one was he wanted to come and be there at the closing ceremonies, which could be part of the protocol. And they weren't down for that in D.C. So
they participated. The athletes participated.
We let them know where it stood, and they said we're in. But the way they did it was invite us back down there, and we thought it was going to be good news. So we took a chartered plane and took all the major Olympic reporters from the LA Times and the New York Times and Chicago Tribune and on and on and on, Sports Illustrated. And we had a private meeting with him, and he said, we're good. And then we walked out. You'll love this. We walked out of this conference room, and all the media's there, and there's this scrum. And there is only one guy that didn't fit the mold of all the other journalists. Gary Todd, who was the drive time TV guy on WIBC from Indianapolis, who shouldn't have been in there. And Gary grabs him, and he's asking all the questions. All the other media are honked off. But we got it, and that's where the excitement began.
Yeah, I was reading some press around that time, and it looked like at some point Dan Quayle. Of course, people have to remember, like, this is the height of the Cold War. 1987. I mean, it wasn't, the Berlin Wall didn't come down to 89. The Soviet Union collapsed in 91. So this is still the height of the Cold War. So the story is unbelievable that you're even in Cuba, given kind of where things were internationally and with the Cold War. But I guess at that time it's Vice President Quayle, or is it Senator Quayle? I guess it's Senator Quayle still, because he's not Vice President until a little bit later.
That's right. He was Senator.
So he publicly said, "Hey, this isn't a good idea. I'm going down to meet with Fidel." Is it something to that?
I don't remember the exact words, but we'd announced that he was coming, and the Indianapolis Star had reported that we'd been down there twice.
Yeah,
and then I just see one morning in the Star that Dan Quayle objected to us patronizing or something Fidel Castro.
Yeah.
Come on, Dan.
He had to get his creds ready to be vice president.
Exactly.
Right?
But you're exactly right about one thing. I mean, this was Cold War.
Yeah.
So there was lots going on with Cuba and Russia, and like Nicaragua and El Salvador were revolutionaries. There's a lot. And it just sort of seemed like the better the athletes, the more likely they were to be on the wrong side of the political spectrum.
I mean, that's a very, very heady times to be dealing. I mean, you're dealing with international relations, and it's pretty. I mean, it's pretty awesome. The whole effort is just amazing to me.
Well, after the second trip, I got a bear hug with the media there, which ended up in the Star. And I had a family that lived at Kessler and Guilford, and 2 little kids, and we started getting death threats just because we were playing footsie with this communist.
Yeah.
So it was, I don't know about heady, but it was hairy at times.
Certainly interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Not a dull moment. Well, so the Pan Am Games are a big success. Indianapolis shows very, very well. I'll talk a little bit more about Indianapolis sports strategy and so forth, which you hinted at, but you get involved with tennis next, and remind our listeners when Indianapolis decides to make a big investment and host the tennis tournament here over on the IUPUI campus. But talk a little bit about how that transpired and your involvement there.
Yeah. Lilly Endowment put in $9 of the $13 million required to build the new downtown tennis center, which, other than Market Square Arena, was the first downtown sports venue. And we had a tournament at that point and still did. And one day, my friend Jim Morris at Lilly Endowment asked me if I'd meet him for a drink in the Columbia Club bar. And he said, we put this money into this venue. We think it's, world class, but it feels like the tournament's kind of going downhill fast. You played college tennis. What would you do? So I told him what I would do. And like a day later, gave him 2 pages or something. And the next thing I know, I'm the volunteer president of the committee while I'm getting paid to do the Pan Am games. So it was, I played college tennis. I had followed tennis closely, and I thought it was pretty obvious the 4 or 5 things that we needed to do, some of which were stealing pages from the Sports Corps playbook.
Yeah. And
it got turned, we got a lot of volunteers involved, and, the same kind of great people that have done all the other events. And it really turned quickly and became one of the best events on the ATP Tour.
I recall, so I was a high school tennis player up in Mishawaka, Indiana, and our team every year would come down to the clay courts when I was a kid of the late 80s. And so it was always world class. I mean, I just remember it was so much fun. And you had you had just the greats there. And it was just so awesome to have it in Indianapolis. So when the decision was made, I guess that you would remember like why the tournament ended, but then when the stadium came down, I was really disheartened because I just thought that was the coolest venue. It was an incredible tournament. It was a fun thing to have in Indianapolis, added to the sports scene in Indianapolis. Why did it come to an end? I mean, I remember it switched to hard courts because I remember the players complaining. It was right before the U.S. Open, and that more and more, as I recall, were deciding to skip it and go to Cincinnati instead. You would know it more intimately than that.
Yeah. So it was a clay court event, but then and the U.S. Open was clay, and then they paved the courts in New York, and we didn't. So players just didn't want to play on clay 2 weeks before the U.S. Open. So I made the decision basically to pave them, and that was part of turning it around. That was obvious. So it's a long story, and there are people who would blame me for the demise of the Indianapolis tournament while I was at the head of the ATP. But in short order, the men's calendar, assumed it had to be set up so that it created swings in continents that led to Grand Slams for the most part. And if you're a European player and you don't want to be in the U.S. for too many weeks in a row before you're in New York. So we decided to put our 2 biggest events, which were Cincinnati and the Canadian Open, in the second and third weeks before the U.S. Open, which players had been clamoring for since before I was involved.
Okay.
So it honestly, from every perspective except Indianapolis's, had to happen. I believed that it could still work for Indy, and thought that some mistakes were made that maybe hastened its demise.
Yeah.
And like you, I hate that happened.
Yeah. Miss it. Yeah.
Shame.
Well, so your involvement with tennis, of course, leads to, I'm assuming you'll tell us, it leads to a great opportunity for you to serve as CEO of the ATP Tour. And that was a long-term commitment. You were there 15 years. But you were leading at a time that was really, in my mind anyway, the heyday of American tennis. I mean, some tennis greats. It was nearing the end of John McEnroe's career, professional career, but he was still active. Pete Sampras, of course, Andre Agassi. These were guys I used to always love to watch. Jim Courier, and I one of the reasons I always loved to watch was that McEnroe and Agassi, especially those two, always stood out as having real attitude. They always had interesting, I literally just unrelated watched, it was during the U.S. Open. I had to watch this clip of the eruptions that McEnroe used to have. You got to be kidding me! And just like he had so many of them, but they were just so entertaining. Like it was, it was like must see TV. Agassi had some similar stuff when he was playing, but I'd love for you to give us a great story if you've got one of one of those guys that we maybe haven't heard or is not. They have they've got so many good ones, I'm sure, that come to mind for you, but I'd love to have one you share.
And you can promise me that if I tell one about John, for example, that he won't see this.
He won't see this.
Never.
No.
Okay.
No.
Good. Well, I've made it a practice not to air any dirty laundry in all this time, but I'll tell you one about John, and there's any number of them about both those guys. But John was a really bright guy. I thought in many ways he's very much like Bobby Knight. Brilliant, unbelievable competitor. But there was sometimes this switch that would flip.
Yeah.
And the speculation at the time of fans were always, he does it on purpose to get a leg up in a match. Maybe a bit, but I saw a number of times when I don't think it was just the switch flipped.
Right.
So one time he and I are having dinner at, I think it was called Sabatini's, an Italian restaurant in Tokyo. And it's he and I and his agent, Sergio Palmieri, who's an Italian. So, which is probably why we're at an Italian restaurant. So we're having a great conversation. We're talking about ideas for improving the game and the ATP Tour's calendar. And at one point, John says, and things are going really well, and you're always you just had to hope that it was
didn't go off the rails.
It was really good. And at one point, John says, you know what we need? What we ought to do? We ought to create an indoor grass court Grand Slam. So before I'm biting my lip. Before I could say anything, Sergio says, yeah, John, then we could just give you the trophy before it starts. It'd be perfect for John McEnroe's style of play. Well, he lost it. He was not happy for the rest of the evening. Not too long after that, he's sitting here and I'm sitting here and Sergio's here. Nice little old lady American comes up from behind him with a napkin and she asks him for his autograph. I won't go into what happened, but it was not pleasant for any of us, and particularly not her. She kind of walks off. And now we're done with dinner. It had been fairly tense the rest of the evening. And now a guy comes, he's same path. He's coming from behind John. He's got this humongous scrapbook with like plywood covers. And he comes up and it's the owner of the place. He says, would you gentlemen be kind enough to sign, our guest book? And I said, you want John's? John, same thing. It didn't go well. Really bad. So now dinner ends and we get out and we're walking. We didn't have a car, so we're getting a taxi and we're at the intersection of two one-way streets. And so where we are, the taxis are right next to us and they almost stop to turn left onto the other street. And each time he just assumed they were stopping for him or us. And each time there'd be somebody in the back seat and he'd get madder and madder and madder. It was bad. And eventually it'd gone on for so long. He steps off and he kicks as hard as you could kick the side quarter panel of the taxi and falls on his rear end in the street. Now, John, why don't we split up? We'll each get a taxi. We'll see who gets home first. It was, but he was also brilliant, and he was what a player.
Yeah. Oh my!
I also remember really quickly in New Haven, Connecticut, at a tournament, we were trying to shake up the game, which was in those days, quiet, please, and we asked we had music for the first time as over changeovers, and a lot of guys that I thought would like it didn't like it, including Mr. McEnroe. At one point, the television cameras at the time were on those huge tripods, like our height. Mm-hmm. The camera's eye level with us. He just went over, pushed it over. How much time you got?
So good. I just, as I said, I watched this clip recently, and it's when you said a switch would flip, it's like he couldn't, and once it flipped, he couldn't turn it around.
I don't
like
think so.
he was not going to let it. I mean, he'd call tournament directors in. He'd wait. It'd be all these long waits while tournament director would come in to make a decision, which usually would be almost always exactly what the umpire had already ruled. They couldn't overrule normally the umpire. But it's just fascinating because, this would take 10, 15 minutes. Sometimes matches would just be stopped. So the opponent is there. I'm sure, that's part of getting in their
time
head.
For another one?
Yeah, of course.
This one's about Andre, but indirectly. So I'm in the job. I'm in bed with my wife reading a book in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. And the phone rings, and it's the chief official from the ATP who says, "Mark, we got a problem. We've defaulted Andre Agassi from the Indianapolis tournament." He was playing the featured night match. And his coach wants to talk to you, and Andre probably wants to talk to you, and I'm sure the tournament director, Rob McGill, wants to talk to you. I go, "Well, what happened?" And he says, "Well, something happened," and Andre goes off, and he goes up to the chair umpire, and he looks him in the eye, and he says, "F you." The understood protocol by all players was you could sort of say F this, F that, but not to the official F you. And the judgment was made that that's exactly what happened, so there was no judgment involved. So, his coach gets on and goes, "Mark, this is ridiculous." He, and then Andre gets on, and then the tournament director get on and go, "Gentlemen, I'm here in bed. I wasn't there. There's not a chance in the world we're going to." Oh, and the tournament director, back to your point, had gone out on the court when this happened.
Yeah.
And apparently grabbed the mic and said, "Everybody stay in your seats. This is the last match. I'm going to get this resolved." So I'm supposed to say, "Okay, fine, resume play." Anyway, there's 1,000 of those.
Oh my God. Well, more ahead with Mark Miles, President and CEO of Penske Entertainment, when we return to Off the Record, presented by Prolific. Most organizations hit a point where growth stalls. The message blends in, the site stops converting, the pipeline softens. That's when I tell leaders about Prolific, the growth firm for purpose-driven leaders. Through full-service marketing and strategy, they clarify the story, rebuild your go-to-market, and drive sales. Most importantly, Prolific holds itself accountable to the metrics that matter to you. If you're ready for your next growth stage, learn more about Prolific at prolifichq.com. Welcome back to Off the Record Podcast. I'm Nate Feltman, CEO of IBJ Media, and today I'm fortunate enough to be talking with Mark Miles, President and CEO of Penske Entertainment. Of course, Mark oversees Indy's iconic Indianapolis Motor Speedway, the IndyCar Racing Series, and the Indianapolis 500. So, Mark, it's 15 years. You led the ATP Tour, and then you make the decision to come back to Indy and lead Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. First, did you always know that you'd come back to Indianapolis, and you had been gone for 15 years? Remind us where you were when you were running the ATP tournament. Where were you living? Where was your family living? And did you know that eventually you guys would come back?
When I took that job, I had never done anything for more than 3 years. So my life never looked to me like a career. It was just really fun things. And so I didn't really know, but I didn't quit memberships at Woodstock and the Columbia Club thinking I'll be back tomorrow. Who knows how long this might make sense. So no, I didn't know I'd be there 15 years. We lived in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, the Jacksonville area, except for 2.5 years when my family and I lived in the south of France and worked out of our office in Monaco.
Wow.
Which was great.
Yeah.
We were selling our own TV rights, and there's a lot of travel. So, 15 years was enough, and they'd probably had enough of me. I couldn't figure out the other things that I wanted to do that would help grow the game that I could sell. And while I was the chairman and CEO of the ATP, I often felt more like a prime minister than a commissioner. You really had to sell through initiatives, even rule changes to tournaments and players alike. But it was time. So I looked at a business that was in Jacksonville I thought about buying and couldn't get that done. And I got a call from friends in Indianapolis, said, there's this thing called the CICP, which operated under a different name before I left, but the idea was the same. And I read what they were doing. I couldn't figure out what they were really doing. I said, well, if if you want me to do this, will it be there long enough for me to unpack? I remember asking Sidney Terrell, who was a member, that question, and they said, yeah, this has legs. So, yeah, we came up, and that was a great time, and it was a great way for me to kind of re-engage with the city and state and figure out what was going on and see if we could help push things.
And so you come back, you're CEO of Central Indiana Corporate Partnership. At that time, I believe Mitch was governor, or
yes,
I think he was. Because I think it was during his first term he was back, and I think that's how I originally met you, because I was at the IEDC working with Mitch. What was at that time, what was your biggest focus as CEO, leader of the CICP? We're going to talk about the Super Bowl coming a little bit later, but what did you focus on in terms of economic development or big picture for Central Indiana at that time?
The group had previously engaged the Battelle Group think tank in Columbus, Ohio, and they had adopted a strategic approach, which was a cluster strategy, which basically said, look at life sciences and advanced manufacturing and logistics and maybe IT, and that should be the focus. There was much less about workforce. There were subsidiary questions about capital, venture, et cetera. And so the BioCrossroads had already been created before I got back. And I may not be the most strategic person on the planet, but I like to get stuff done. So I said, well, why don't we you got one, you've got 3 other clusters. Let's create some capacity in those same spaces in similar ways. So Connexus, Indiana got formed. We actually sort of acquired or assumed TechPoint, and now we're in the IT space. And then others, they've gone on to have any number of them since then. But it was really about pursuing this strategy and creating capacity in these areas.
So you created similar verticals like BioCrossroads during your time. And then I think it was also while you were serving as CICP, the Super Bowl opportunity comes along. Yeah. And talk about how that came about, and once again, how you end up being in the middle of a major sports, effort by the city.
I was at my desk at the CICP after the mayoral election had occurred, and Greg Ballard was the mayor-elect. I had met him exactly once for a lunch. Phone rings. It's Greg. He said, Mark, blah, blah, blah. And then he said, in the campaign, I wasn't so sure. I was a little more populist. I wasn't sure we wanted to go after the Super Bowl again. But now I think we should. And he said, and I quote, when I think about the Super Bowl, I see your face. Are you kidding me?
I see your face.
So I'm pretty sure Ann Shane might have put him up to that. But so we talked about it, and I remember initially, because it's like a 4-year process once you get it before you host it. And so I said, well, I'll do the bid, but I don't want to promise you another 4 years yet. I don't know. But, it was great working with Allison Millington and Kathy Langham and so many amazing people. And we thought we could be innovative in the way it was staged, and it worked out pretty well.
Put on an incredible show. I remember it well because it's like early February, right when the Super Bowl happens. I remember being downtown that day in 2012, correct? Is that right? 2012. And, Indiana, early February, I think, okay, it's going to be 30 below. It's going to be 10 degrees, whatever. But it's like 72 degrees and the sun is shining. And it's that weekend was just unbelievable. But you put on an incredible show.
The city and state put on an incredible show. Yeah, we were so lucky with the weather. I always credit Allison's direct connection to higher powers for that.
So when you look back, Mark, at all the amazing sports initiatives that this city has put on, we've talked about a lot of them. Is there a moment when you look back and you say, okay, that was the moment that Indianapolis became a host of major sporting events and became a world-class city capable of hosting events of any stature? Of course, we've gone on to host many Final Four. Some of them were hosted even during time, but then we attracted the NCAA. And we host Big Ten championships. We've hosted the championship of the football championship, NCAA football champ. We've hosted just about everything you can host. We've hosted NBA All-Star games, men and women.
It's a long list.
Was there a moment where you said, that looking back now, hindsight's always 20/20, that was the tipping point. That was when Indianapolis we did something that showed the world that we can do this and we will do this.
Yeah, I think for me it's pretty clear kind of and it's the Pan Am Games. I mean, it was a really major event at a different kind of scale, different kinds of requirements, worldwide, global in some respects, 17 hours on CBS, 38,000 volunteers. It was remarkable. But so I think that's kind of the answer to that question. But when I really personally think about it, it was the National Sports Festival and with the creation of the Indiana Sports Corp. And Ted and Jim and the people who were really leading that created a model that has served us all. I just copied it basically for the approach to how we do this, the Pan Am Games and even the Super Bowl. It was really bright, young, volunteer-driven, volunteer management, not just people helping, staff put in the hours, and that was brilliant. And it did a lot of different things. One of them was it allowed us. We always had divisions and then committees under divisions, and the committees and the divisions always had co-chairs, at least two, which is ridiculous, right? Harvard Business School would say, what?
Right.
No accountability. We said diversity. It will allow us to bring people in. We can always have somebody we've worked with before, so you sort of get some stability in it, but we can bring people in that we didn't know and that we wouldn't have known. Mm-hmm. And then they'd get to know each other. And I think that was a wonderful thing for the city.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, as we've been talking about, we hosted and we continue to host amazing events in this city. There are some who feel that, gosh, we do that really well, but are we doing all the other things as well as we can in the city of Indianapolis? There's some who feel that we're not necessarily keeping up with peer cities that were our peer cities. Some of them have passed us by. People bring up all the time, as you know, and hear Nashville, and they bring up Austin. They think that Columbus now is kind of moving even faster. People look at Pittsburgh and other places that have gone through tough times and now are rising. How do you feel that we're doing as a city today? And if as you look at the situation today in Indianapolis, and you've been involved in so many different initiatives over the years, directly and indirectly with your current job, where do you think we are, and have we lost the dynamism that some of the things you're describing with the people you described that were civic leaders and have really gone out and made a difference in this city, in this state? And if we have, how do we get it back?
Well, it's a complicated and delicate question, but the first thing I'd say on the affirming side, and I mean it, and I would never 10 years ago have thought I'd say it, but all credit to the surrounding counties. I mean, to some extent, maybe they've masked some deficiencies in Marion County. But if you think about what's gone on in Hamilton County, what's been created there, the same is true for Hendricks County and around. It's amazing. And, but for the political boundaries in 465, right. It's the city in a functional sense, really. So that's all great news, and it continues to accelerate. Momentum is so important, and they have it. I think it's fair to say that the city of Indianapolis at the moment lacks that momentum. I don't remember which great American philosopher said you can be on the right road and headed in the right direction, but if you're standing still, you get run over.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like that's what's happening for Marion County. There's so much. It's not, we've held our own with population. We brought some employers, even some tech firms, but there's just so much you can feel that could be done at lots of levels. I feel like the kind of economic development work that was being done by governors not so long ago, with a greater focus in Indianapolis would be a good thing. And there's It's right there. I've always felt like, and we kind of acted on this in the Super Bowl with what became known as the Legacy Project, that, we have to have great walkable urban core city neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great for everybody. I don't mean that we kick all the people who are living there now out. We have to find a way to avoid that. But I think the Near East Side is a great example of where, just think about what's happened. And there's a number of them. But I think we could be much more intentional. I think the city could be a much better partner. We could be dealing with the housing shortage that's brutal in Indianapolis, and doing that in a way where at the same time we focus on the neighborhoods where the housing's being constructed, so that they're places people of all stripes, of all demographics want to live. And then we're a place that talent is more likely to gravitate to instead of around.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to be done. I don't think we need to be fatalistic about it. There's a lot to work with, and it's the spirit of getting people to pitch in and contribute is right under the surface. So we should be scratching that surface.
Yeah. I mean, Jim Morris, who you've mentioned a couple of times, and who did this podcast with me. I mean, he, as you know, he could not have been a stronger proponent of having a strong downtown core. He emphasized it nonstop. He lived it. And, I often just think we've got to figure out, there's not anybody that ever will replace Jim Morris, but we got to have a lot of Jim Morrises that come step forward and say downtown matters, because people say all the time you can't be a suburb. You mentioned the suburbs; they are fantastic. They've got new entertainment venues, but you can't be a suburb of nothing. You've got to have a downtown core that's strong, and obviously we count on it in terms of continue to host great events in this city, Yeah,
and it's not an act of God; it's man-made.
Yeah,
you can think of other cities. Detroit, that was about to be shuttered. It was shuttered in part and bankrupt, and it's come back and it's in a great place. So, we're not there. We're not close to there, but we have so much upside, and I believe it's the people of the city, among other things, that give us that real reason for optimism.
Yeah. So I want to turn to your current job finally. I've loved exploring down memory lane, but your involvement with IndyCar and the Speedway dates back to 2013 when you were hired by Tony George and the Holman family, of course, the longtime owners of the Speedway. And then the track transitions to Roger Penske in 2020, a major transition for the most iconic piece of real estate in our state, in our city. Clearly, Roger Penske has injected a lot of new life into the place, into the 500, into IMS, and his passion. You feel it, you see it. I've heard you tell stories about just how passionate he is. How should Hoosiers in general think about the future of IMS? Is there somebody that will follow with this in Roger's footsteps that has the same passion, the same commitment to the city of Indianapolis, to the state of Indiana, with what is just such an important part of our history and our future?
Well, it shouldn't go without saying that he's the perfect guy at the right time for both IMS and IndyCar, and really I can't think of one without the other. IndyCar can't be the league that it ought to be without its Super Bowl, even if the scheduling's a little different. And if you didn't have a strong, compelling league that makes drivers known and all the rest of it, then you wouldn't have the same momentum behind the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the 500. So saying that, he's amazing, truly amazing. And we could talk forever about his personal attributes, but in response to your question, it's in his soul to care about this. There's no private equity bone in his body about this. He is there so that his grandkids and his family, for as long as it can be, feel like they're trustees of it, in the same way that the Holman family did before.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why he's in it. and I don't know what happens when he and I exit.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure, knowing that almost nothing is a matter of chance or is left to chance, he's thought it through carefully, and it'll be left in a good place.
Yeah. So recently, there was a part of the equity ownership was sold to Fox Sports, correct?
Yeah.
I know the future is hard to predict, but how do you see that new player in the space? I mean, it's been really interesting to observe. Like, this is happening in a lot of sports, that you're seeing media companies get intertwined directly in the ownership of. It's happening again and again, which is just an interesting development. But how do you see this impacting the sport, and in particular IMS, going forward?
I think it was extraordinarily important and a fabulous move. The way it happened is telling, and really reflects on Roger. We weren't looking to have this happen. There was no plan to go find an investor. He doesn't need the money, to be quite frank about it. So when they raised the possibility, first they were quite subtle. There were conversations where I was told, we got a really strong balance sheet at the parent company, Fox, right? The Murdoch family, basically. And we got a lot of cash. And if you see things that we might be interested in, let us know. And they, in adjacent spaces maybe, but not necessarily. So, I don't remember giving him any leads, but the next thing I know, they just said, what about Penske Entertainment? And Roger jumped at it for the right reasons. It's important to make one distinction. We just had an owners meeting, and a couple of the owners didn't understand it. They bought a third of the stock in the company, so they're investors and equity holders.
Mm-hmm.
They did not buy the media rights. The media rights before they bought the stock were arranged through a licensing agreement where for so many years they're our broadcaster, and all the conditions are set forth. When that's over, we'll go to the market and we'll see what happens. So that's still true. There's a separate media licensing agreement that's not the same thing as the shareholders agreement.
Mm-hmm.
So that's important to know, because we're going to grow this sport, and they're going to be enormously helpful in growing it. And that's IndyCar and IMS, and our media rights will get more valuable, and then they're going to have to pony up. But I think they're approaching it but in a very helpful way, both as an owner of the company, an investor in the company, and as a broadcaster that's creating value.
Yeah.
So the principle, they're a media company of incredible reach, and the talent as kind of promotionally and marketing wise inside that company is astonishing. So they do so many things we don't even ask them to do to help grow the sport so far. In a room where we're talking about other things, their perspective is this whole thing needs to become a marketing company. A league that's successful is a marketer.
Mm-hmm.
And we're great operators. And, I think we've done some really good marketing at IMS, but we got a lot more to do for IndyCar. And I think their influence in that regard, plus their reach, is really important. I tell, when people say, well, what impact will it have? Well, let me just give you an example. When we decided that it was time to announce that the transaction had closed, so now it's got to be public, or we want to make it public. The decision was that there was a reporter at the Wall Street Journal that wanted to write an article about it and talk about it as a media trend and the like. So, in fact, this article was arranged, and he wrote it, and then it was released, posted, and then we put it out through news release publicly. And I say to people, when was the last time that you read about us in the Wall Street Journal? It's telling, right? And I'm not saying, they had to believe there's no control from Fox Sport over the Journal and their editorial policies and the like, but they knew who to call to present the opportunities.
Right.
So their reach in so many ways is fantastic. Barstool, they just made a strategic deal with. Next thing you know, the prominent owner of Barstool, is in the 2-seater down at our finale race in Nashville. And all their talent has been to the 500 and is constantly talking about us. It portends well for our future.
It seems like interests are aligned. I can't see them giving the deal though. I mean, they're an owner, and then they're going to give the deal to a different media company for view. I mean, that's going to be interesting.
Well, let's assume they won't.
Yeah,
but they'll have to match.
Yeah, exactly.
And we will be able to find out what's there. So it's a really good position.
Yeah, it's neat. Well, it feels like this year all of the metrics that I'm sure Roger, you care about for the 500, we're going in the right direction. It seems like you're sold out, so we all get to watch it. If we're not at the race, local viewers could watch it simultaneous with the running. You had over 7 million viewers. It's my understanding, the most in 17 years. Talk a minute about what you're seeing as maybe renewed interest in the sport, and I'm seeing at least maybe one strategic effort of really raising the profile of certain drivers. I'm seeing the Fox ads, and it's interesting because you see other sports really going off their best and iconic players, and so it makes sense to me. But talk a little bit about what the rise in viewership and all the metrics I mentioned.
Yeah, well, again, they're so uniquely. We couldn't write the checks to create all the attention and focus on any of the things that we do without the broadcast partners' help. And if you think about other sports, it's not that the NFL is writing all the checks to get all the attention for the National Football League and the games. The media partners are fundamentally important. So that's central to this. So the commercials are one thing, and we loved the creativity and the way they approached making 3 of our biggest stars bigger stars and making them really attractive personalities. The result, I'll just skip to that. It's the promotion, and it's the fact that all of our 17 races are live on network, which means everybody can get them, and you know where to go. Appointment viewing. Huge results. So this year, IndyCar's overall television audience is up 27%.
Wow.
If you look at all sports in America that have an average of 1 million or more, so we're taking out the ones where a big percentage growth is a little number. We're number 1. So it was the biggest average growth in audience of any sport in America this year, and that's amazing. So that we want to build on that. I think it'll be bigger next year.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of things we've done to, try to make that achievable. But I said earlier about something else. Momentum in the media business and marketing is everything.
Yeah.
And we have it. So now with the Fox partnership in the sense of the shareholder situation, we really have the opportunity to press the throttle. And I think you're going to see really great growth.
Well, it's exciting for Indiana for sure, given how important it is to our image as a state, just people knowing us for racing and all that comes with it, technology, advancement, et cetera. So I always ask my guests the last question, not always the last question, but one of the questions I ask is about mentors. I mentioned, of course, Senator Lugar, but I'm curious from your perspective to learn who other maybe important mentors to you have been in your career.
Yeah. Again, I want to stipulate that the definition for me wasn't somebody who sat down with me and we had lunch once a week. It was people I had the incredible good fortune to be around and observe. In reverse order, Roger Penske. I mean, God, what I learned from him every day is remarkable. You could go back, believe it or not, Scoutmasters, Lugar, Mitch. Earlier, Tom Moses was a such a driving force civically in Indianapolis, and I had great access to him. I'm leaving out lots of them, but they were all highly motivated, highly principled, talented, and selfless.
Yeah,
right. I mean, they did things to make things better, and so I was very lucky.
Yeah, great people to be around and learn from. So, Mark, we made it to Off the Record Speed Round, where I ask you some fun questions just so we get to know you even more. Your favorite movie?
I thought about it this morning. As Good as It Gets.
As Good as It Gets.
You'll have to look it up.
Okay.
But it just cracks me up.
Favorite place to vacation?
The Caribbean, any number of islands. I love being on the water and fishing in the sun.
Favorite musical artist?
John Lennon.
What's the first thing you do in the morning?
I get up at 5. By 5:05, I'm reading 2 newspapers.
Is that right?
Yeah, online.
Is one of them the IBJ?
Uh-huh.
Okay, good.
Sort of. And catching up with the email that came in overnight. I go to bed pretty early, and then I get some exercise at my house.
Title of the last book you read or your favorite book you can remember?
The last couple books I read, I don't remember how this happened, but were Lewis and Clark and Astros. I think that's the right name. Like Astor. And they're early 1800s, and it was really sort of after the formation of the country, that period in the early 1800s when we crossed from coast to coast and sort of began to make a dent in the frontier.
Yeah. What food can you not live without?
Bacon.
That's a good one. Favorite sport to watch besides IndyCar?
I if I'm home, I don't miss Colts football.
Yeah.
So I guess I'd say the Colts. I don't know that applies equally to all NFL, but it's sort of the same.
Yeah.
And tennis.
Best advice you ever received?
It was, again, it wasn't some slogan, but it was Jim and Tom and a couple others just to think about connecting the dots, not about the thing right in front of you, but how Jim used to talk about it a lot, right? How you see the bigger opportunity in the thing right in front of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Last question, advice to a young person that really wants to be a leader, wants to lead in our community, wants to lead at their organization. What advice would you give to somebody young who wants to be a leader?
Don't talk about it, earn it. The way I think about earning it is trust. To me, I don't mean that you shouldn't steal or you should be honest. We'd take that as those things as a given, but that you do what you say you'll do, and that the people around you know that they can count on you for whatever it is, and often without you being asked. So I sum all that up as trust, and it's a rare commodity. I mean, even in your own family,
yeah. How
many times do you take it to the bank when somebody says, "Yeah, I'll do this," and then hey, have we done this?
Exactly.
So and by the way, Allison Millington's the best on the planet. I quit taking notes in meetings with Allison because it's done.
It's awesome.
If she thinks about it, she'll follow up.
It's good advice. Good advice. Well, Mark, I just want to thank you for taking the time to be on the Indiana 250 podcast. I want to thank you for your leadership through lots of decades and continued leadership in our city and one of our most iconic places, the Indy 500 and IMS. Thank you for all you've done for our city and state, Mark.
Thanks, Nate. I really admire what you're doing with your enterprise too. It's important to the city and state.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. To learn more about other leaders on IBJ Media's Indiana 250 list, go to indiana250.com and look for a Page 2 feature each week in IBJ. We'll be back with the new Indiana 250 off-the-record conversation soon.
The economy and the market are in a hairy place these days. It's up a lot, it's down a lot, it's sideways, and it seems on the hour there's breaking news coming out of all areas of the country. How do you get your head around that? How do you not go crazy in the process? I'm Peter Dunn. You may know me as Pete the Planner, IBJ columnist, and my job for years has been to help you understand your financial life better in context with everything else going on. So what am I encouraging you to do? Well, listen to the Pete the Planner Show. Yeah, it's a podcast. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts, or simply listen at ibjpodcasts.com.
On the go? So are we. Get the IBJ Media app, your all-in-one news source for Indiana business news. Get breaking news alerts, read every story from IBJ, Inside Indiana Business, and the Indiana Lawyer, and listen to your favorite podcasts all in one place. Big news, small screen. Search IBJ Media and download the app today.